Ethan Joella teaches English and psychology at the University of Delaware and specializes in community writing workshops. His work has appeared in River Teeth, The MacGuffin, Delaware Beach Life, and Third Wednesday. He is a author of A Little Hope, which was a read with Jenna bonus selection, and A Quiet Life. He lives in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, with his wife and two daughters. And a native of New England, Colleen Hubbard now lives in the UK with her family. She wrote her debut novel, Housebreaking, while on maternity leave from her job with the NHS. From the University of East Anglia's MA program in the creative writing, where she earned the head of school prize with a distinction. RJ Julia and Wesleyan RJ Julia are so grateful to have Colleen Hubbard and Ethan Joella here in conversation today, and I'm going to let them get started.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Colleen, for wanting me and to do this and for trusting me to be in conversation with you. It's funny, I was just saying to Colleen that I feel like I've known her for so long, and this is the first time we're actually talking face to face. Thank you to RJ Julia for having us, and also thank you to Liv Stratman, who organized a debut group of writers on Slack, where we've just been able to meet so many great novelists going through their debut, and the nonfiction writers as well. And it's just been, I think, such an invaluable thing. But anyway, here we go, Colleen. So we thought maybe Colleen could open with a quick reading from Housebreaking, and just to get us all warmed up before the questions.
Yeah, so I have to say in advance that I have a cold because I have a baby who turned 1 today, and he thought in celebration for turning 1, he was going to lick the swing at the playground, which he did a couple days ago. And so he got sick, and he's gotten the rest of us sick. So this is basically what's happening in the book, is that there's a young woman, her parents have both died. She inherited a house, but there are some complications, and the complications are that her uncle owns the land all around the house and wants to use it to make a development. And she doesn't get along with this uncle. She thinks that he's treated her family really badly. So in this particular scene, she is invited to a holiday party, a Christmas party at this uncle's house, and she's going there, and she doesn't mean any good, basically. Their house was a Greek revival of painted white bricks fronted with solid pillars on either side of the door. Electric candles flickered in each window, and there was an enormous holly wreath nailed to the front door, where a couple stood and pressed the bell. Dell stood back, next to the line of parked cars along the driveway. Dell noted Greg's truck, as well as a few more Murrow corporate vehicles that could be either Greg's brothers or some other employees. After looking over her shoulder to see if anyone was observing her, she pushed one of the driver's side mirrors on a Murrow vehicle until it snapped and rolled back like the eyes of a dead man. The sound of a tinkling piano escaped as the front door shut behind the couple entering the house. Had the Murrows become the type of people who bought a piano? And if so, who played it? Probably somebody that they hired for parties. A paid piano man, maybe the local high school teacher, whom they would smile at during the party and ignore if they saw him asking for donations outside the supermarket. She waited a minute for the couple to blend into the party and then tested the door. The knob was solid brass and turned quietly. Inside, thick, honey-colored carpet spilled down the massive central staircase, which ended with black and white check tiles on the floor. To the left was Chuck's TV room, which he called the den. Kids were not allowed inside the den. Back when Dell was a small child, and when parties were casual family affairs, Chuck used to sit inside the den alone with the doors closed once he got bored or irritated by Jean's frequent social gatherings. Now the door was open, and the maroon leather couch was piled high with guest coats. There was a silver platter of keys on a polished wood table. Dell knew that the party would be at the back of the house in a large windowed room that the original owners had used for their indoor pool. The Murrows had filled in the pool when they bought the place. Originally, the windows overlooked a field of pumpkins that Dell's grandparents had planted. But why have pumpkins when you could make money? Now Dell suspected that it bordered a cul-de-sac or maybe a nuclear power plant. There was a quick, quiet knock at the front door. It didn't carry over the sound of the piano. Dell approached the door cautiously and opened it. A man in a navy wool coat held a bottle of wine. She thought that he seemed like someone who worked in construction or construction adjacent. It was obvious that he counted something for a living. It was something about the collar of his button-down shirt. He seemed like he might have 20 of them in the same color, each one hanging in his closet in its plastic bag from the dry cleaners. Sorry I'm late, he smiled. Are you a Murrow? Nope, hired help, she said. The party's in the back. You can leave your stuff up here if you want. His grin disappeared as he walked past her. Toss this on the pile? Toss this on the pile, he asked her. She took his coat, waited until he disappeared, and then went back to the den. A quick sweep of all the unattended coat pockets revealed very little of interest. Crumpled receipts, more keys, packets of Kleenex, a few dollar bills, which she kept. Asset transfer was a phrase that she had learned from her week-long temp job at a finance company. There was a sound of voices approaching from the hall. Dell stood on the other side of the door. Must be nice, said an unknown woman's voice, to be born into a family like this. I guess. It was her cousin Greg. I've never really known anything different. It was nice for you to come. See you in January? The woman apologized for not being able to stay longer, but didn't sound too sorry about it. She left, and Greg retreated back to the party. I'll stop there because I'm about to start coughing.
Really nice. So this is a huge week for you. I mean, I just want you to bask in that for a second because we so rarely take the time to take that all in. But the debut of your novel from a major publisher, and people are comparing it to Eleanor Oliphant and Olive Kitteridge and a man called Uva. So what, can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer? Was this always a dream? Were there some bits of encouragement along the way, some setbacks?
Yes. So I moved to the UK because I did a master's degree in creative writing, but I also studied creative writing at the university undergraduate level and just kind of always wrote. But before then, I always read, I would say. This particular book I started writing in 2019. And I started writing it while I was working full-time in a hospital, which is really difficult. I worked at a cancer hospital. It was quite a stressful job for various reasons, but then I was on maternity leave and I thought, well, I have some time off. I don't have to be at work. And so if I don't write it now, I just thought that I would never find the time. And so I just sort of sat down every day and wrote it until it was done and then sent it off to an agent. And surprisingly, an agent signed me and then sent it off to publishers, and surprisingly one picked it up.
It's fantastic. So can you tell us about the inspiration for the book? I mean, I think writers get hit with ideas all the time. We're always out. We think, oh, I could do that. But there's something about a novel idea that becomes more of an extended idea that haunts you. So how did this become an idea you knew you could develop a novel from?
So I would say, pardon me, I was having this discussion with a friend, Maria Ottelman, who has written a book called How to Be Eaten that's coming out in May. And she has always been a short story writer. And we were in a writing program where everybody was submitting short stories. And I submitted them, and they honestly weren't very good. I think the sentence level writing was fine, but there's just something about the pacing of short stories I couldn't really do and wasn't good at, even though I like reading short stories a lot. And Maria said something in this back and forth about her feeling like I was really a natural novel writer. And I don't know if that is the case or not, but I definitely wanted to write a novel. And I also knew that short stories don't sell particularly well. So I wasn't stressing out about the idea of writing a short story collection. But for this particular book, the idea was that we were staying at a friend's house, and I had read this biography that he had in his house on Shakespeare. And in the biography, it said that Shakespeare and his theater troupe moved their theater over the frozen Thames one night because they were trying to avoid taxes, I think. So they took the entire building and they slid it across the ice. And that seems like something that's obviously fake, like legend, but I really liked the idea of it and the idea of moving a building over ice. And so that's where the genesis of the book is. I thought it was a very striking image, and I wanted to write a book that included that image.
Really nice. What about I think the title is just absolutely perfect. It's just that one word kind of dream title. Did you come up with that, or how did that title come into being?
I did. I actually didn't write the book with the title. I didn't come up with the title until it was done and had been done, I think, for a few months. And so for a while, I think the document was called Book, or maybe even like, I think I had lost the file at some point, or there was like a corruption, some sort of error where it auto saved as book hyphen like or parentheses two. And so I just left it at that. And it was just called Book Two for like a year, even though it was not Book Two, it was like only book. And at some point after the book was done, I just went back to, I had been in this sort of casual workshop with two writers and said, well, I need a title if I'm going to send it out to agents. And I was just workshopping titles with them for one turn that I had in this workshop. Submitted a bunch of them. I didn't like any of them. They didn't like any of them. And then just later I thought Housebreaking, which is like literal in some senses because she's actually breaking a house, but also there's a sense of training. And I think there's a deep theme in the book of learning what it is to be an adult and learning what it is to function in the world and sort of coming of age themes. But everybody is old in the book. The main character is 24. A lot of the characters in the book are in their 50s and 60s and 70s, but they're all sort of grappling with what it is to be a person in the world and how you want to function and how you want to be.
Really? Okay. What I wanted to highlight here, I have so many quotes I want to read, and I'm sure I won't get time to read even 2 or 3 of them, but on page 100, there's this great paragraph where it talks about Dell as a character. And you have, what kind of girl had she been? There were the sporty girls, the pretty ones, the popular ones, the girls who liked horses, girls who read, girls who danced, girls who never left the sides of their mothers, girls who went to church every weekend and sang in the choir, girls who hiked and knew every bird and rock. Dell was not any of those. I'm skipping ahead a little. Dell was not any of those girls. She stroked a blue pony's mane and then snapped the container closed. And I think I just kept thinking about this when I was reading the book, is kind of this ridiculous old notion that has plagued literature and probably, I think, all parts of life for too long, when it comes to like a strong female protagonist, everyone worrying about that character being likable or not. Yeah. And I hate that ridiculous word. It's just such a silly yardstick, I think. But what I love so much about this book is that Dell just transcends all of that. She doesn't even allow for the discussion. She's strong and determined. She doesn't care what people think, doesn't worry about her hygiene, conforming to any kind of gender roles. And this takes place 25 years ago. She puts people in her place. Was that a goal of yours for a character, or did Dell just really, she just set the stage here and went beyond your expectations too?
I would say probably not in a good way. I did not stop and think, how can I create a character that people will love? That was not my intention. How I started with her as a character was knowing that she was going to move a building over ice. And so then I had to ask myself, who would do that? And to me, it had to be somebody who was really angry and was probably not totally mentally there. Like clearly had something going on where they would do something that was dangerous, where they would almost certainly fail. They could get really hurt. They could die. And so she had to have a lot going on. Also, she had to spend a lot of time on her own. And so in the book, there are sections of the book where it's just her thinking. And she's dismantling the house and she's, going at the kitchen with a hammer or something. The question for the writer there is, how do you write a scene like that and not make it boring when there's not dialogue and there aren't big dramatic events happening? And to me, she had to be an interesting enough, her thoughts and her observations had to be sharp and interesting enough for those sections not to drag. And so for me, it was really her sense of humor probably that was a necessary component. I personally find her very likable. I personally root for her and want her to win. And although I can understand why other people wouldn't feel that same way, for me, I actually feel quite protective. And like, if a person were not to like her, that would bother me more than it should probably.
No, I completely get it. And I found her just so likable too. I felt like her her dreams were all of our dreams. I felt like she was up against the same things that we all have. So tell us about, when I was reading this, once you start thinking about a house getting dismantled, I mean, you think of it almost like in this basic way of just these gingerbread house pieces, but then you realize from reading your book, oh wow, that's a lot more technical. There's wires and insulation. I mean, I had to look up what lath was, which shows how little I know. So can you tell us about the research that went into this? Like what did you already know? What did you have to learn? How did your research maybe even change the direction of the book?
So I first just did like a basic internet search and found that there was an article in the New York Times Magazine by John Muallim, who writes a lot of magazine pieces, about this architect called Brad Guy, who does basically unbuilds houses, and he does them for the purpose of recycling. So it's material reuse. He's doing it so that nothing is wasted. And so he's rebuilding to the point that all of the nails that are still usable in different projects are all piled up and reused. So completely unbuilt a house. And I emailed him and just said, hi, I am a writer. I have no knowledge of construction or architecture. I want to write a book about somebody who unbuilds a house. Can you tell me how to do that? And I thought he was going to say, that's completely insane, or one person couldn't do this by themselves, or you have no idea what you're talking about. I thought that he would be like arrogant and oppressive in some way. And I don't know why I thought that, because he's so good at what he does and he's such an expert, and I knew nothing. And actually he was really lovely and said it's totally possible. His timeline that he thought a person could do it in, it was much shorter than what I thought it would be. And also he sent me all of this information. So he sent me this database of houses, like historic farmhouses in Massachusetts, and told me, if you pick one out and tell me what you want the house to look like, I will tell you how to unbuild it. I will tell you, like, because I was asking him basic things, like if I swung a pickaxe at a wall in this house, what would come out? Like what's under the paint, what's under the wallpaper? And he was around and really good about answering questions like that, where I have no idea, but I needed that kind of gritty level of detail in order to make it believable.
Well, that's, and you can find very unhelpful people doing research, but when you find that one helpful person, they don't want to quit either. They want to just keep being involved along the way.
He wanted it right. He wanted it done right. And I'm afraid, I haven't sent him the book, and I'm kind of afraid of him reading it, because I'm afraid at some point he's going to be like, oh, page 117, he screwed that up.
I was going to say, did he look at any sample pages?
No, absolutely not. No, I don't want that. No.
Yeah. Do you find yourself with writing generally that you do have to do research, or was this kind of your research exception? I try to avoid research like the plague. So.
I think as a person, I would like research. I have a degree in library science, and I've worked in an archive, although I'm not a professional. I've never worked as a professional librarian, but I really like research, and yet it's not something that I generally do as part of books, which is maybe something I should reconsider. Maybe I should write a researched book. Maybe I should do something set in 1712 or whatever, and then write about that.
Yeah, that's really admirable. All right, so let's switch a little bit to what about some challenges of plot and character? Because you had a really technical setup with a technical kind of timeline. Did you ever worry, or did you ever find yourself having Dell getting painted into a corner, and did you have to remedy that? Because yeah, it's really a plot where everything has to work.
So I did, one of the things that I did to create the book was write a one-page summary of what would happen. And that was something that was suggested to me by a teacher in an MA program who's a crime writer. And he needed that because when you're writing a crime, everything has to link up and work, or else the whole book doesn't work. And I never considered that for literary fiction. It just seemed like, well, I'm just going to write whatever I want to write. But actually, especially because I had so little time to write and I had a newborn and we were in lockdown, so we had no childcare, that was really helpful. But what I found was my one-page summary was really high level. And then when I actually was writing, I could feel sometimes when my attention was drifting from the page. And at that point, I thought, well, if my attention is drifting, if this isn't that interesting to me, and I care more about the book than anybody else is going to care about it, then something needs to shift. And so, for example, there's a whole section in the middle of the book where Dell stops the project, the unbuilding project, and she goes and works on a Christmas tree farm. And that wasn't in my one-page summary. That was just the point at which I thought something has to be a bit different. She's been on her own for too long and it's just feeling a bit samey, and something has to be, there needs to be more humor and comedy in it, and there needs to be more interaction and dialogue. And so I took her out and put her with this person that she likes and trusts so that she could have a lot of conflict and conversation. But that just came about naturally because I needed something different.
And so where do you, when you think about characters, and when you think about literary fiction is all about character, how do you come up with characters? Where do you get your characters from? Are you out in the grocery store kind of listening to conversations and that influences it, or do they just come from a mysterious place?
There's one character, Eleanor, who's based on the look of somebody I knew when I was a child, and her personality isn't like that person, but I just remember looking at this person as a very young child and thinking that she seemed, she was an older lady and she just dressed up all the time in like massive fur coats and like fake diamond earrings probably. But we lived in a really normal working class suburb where her outfits were really weird. And I don't know, she died a long time ago when I was young, so I don't really know anything about her, but I like that look. And so she came from this look. And the other characters just sort of developed naturally in relationship to the book. So I knew that I wanted a core relationship, a friendship between Dell and one of her father's friends, because I wanted an intergenerational relationship, and also something that linked her to people who have died, because a lot of people in the book have died already. And so I created him, and also wanted him to be, one of the central questions of the book is what it means to be an outsider. And when you see yourself as an outsider and you frame yourself as an outsider, even if it's true, what do you lose by accepting this view of yourself and framing everything and every interaction with you as an outsider on the fringe of society? And I needed people that were sort of in opposition to that. And so there are some characters that came out because I needed somebody to be really a conformist. I needed people who really cared about what society thought of them, because they created a natural interaction with the protagonist that I thought was interesting.
So while we're on that subject, which of the characters came really easily to you? So definitely Eleanor, who is just fantastic. And who was a struggle to write? You have a favorite, unfavorite character?
Tim, who's her best friend, was really easy to write. He just reminded me, there was a person who read this book early on who is a gay man in his 50s, and Tim is a gay man in his 50s. And the person who was the reader said, he just reminds me of those like kind of creepy, crazy looking guys that you see at the gym who you think that they might actually like have a gun on them at the gym. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly it is. I got it right, because that's exactly the person that he is. And it's just doing drugs and listening to records in the basement of his apartment building. I wanted that sort of like creepy vibe of, he knew everybody. Everybody in the neighborhood would talk to him, but everybody would find him creepy and unsettling, which I liked about him. So he was very fun to write because he was so funny and idiosyncratic.
And the spaghetti sauce on the wall. Do you have was he one of your favorites then?
Yes, I would say he was my favorite.
Yeah. So when we think about a lot of the characters, even ones Dell doesn't like because Dell has strong opinions, but a lot of them get these beautiful kind of redemptive moments that in the book at different points of the book. So you really do see one endearing qualities in some that you don't see right in the beginning. Is that something you feel is a human truth, that there are these other sides to people, that even highly flawed people have decent sides? Is that what, do you try to show that in your writing, or does it just come across?
I think that nobody thinks that they are a villain, but I don't necessarily think that terrible people have good sides or good components to them. I think actually it's like some people can just be terrible. But I think that nobody thinks that they're a villain. And so by allowing the shift of the focus in the book to sometimes show people as they see themselves. You see the sides of themselves that they find appealing or attractive, or that they want to show to other people, even if ultimately that character is up to no good.
And what made you decide the setting? What made you decide to set it where you did? Because what's so great is that it feels very specific, very New England, but it also feels like anyone that grew up in a small town has such, I mean, I know there's always that family like the Murrows that everybody in town is kind of rolling their eyes at. But there's the same grocery store people and the same gas station people. It just felt so, it could be anywhere, but then also so specific to New England. What made you decide to set it there, and what were some techniques you used to bring that up?
I grew up in New England, and so I wanted to set it there because I felt like I knew, like I could do a good job of describing the natural world, and I wanted a light touch with the natural world, but I wanted to be correct about like what bush would have berries on it if she was looking at it in the pond behind her house at a certain time of year. And I felt like I could do a good job of describing that. I couldn't set it though where I grew up, because I grew up in a very large town or a very small city. And I wanted this to be more rural. Also, just like climate wise, it needed to maintain ice on a pond for several months over winter. And where I grew up is too close to the shore probably, and too warm for that in an average winter. And so it's set in my mind further north in New England. And I did quite a bit of work to like find a specific place. And some of it was at the database that Brad Guy, the architect, pointed me to find a farmhouse where I felt like I needed to know exactly what the house would look like. And so I went through the database and found a house in a particular place. And so I know where that town is and I know where that house is. And then I also like use Google Maps to walk through the downtown of this very small town, which is a rural town outside of probably a mill town in Massachusetts, where just everything has closed down. And I wanted that vibe of coming into town, and the young people have mostly had to move out because there aren't any jobs. Everybody knows everybody, and the sense of claustrophobia that you get when you're the sort of person that doesn't want to be looked at and you don't want to be noticed. And she really doesn't want to be looked at, the protagonist. She does not want to be noticed. She's the sort of person that is going to the grocery store at 3 a.m. so that she won't possibly bump into anybody. But I wanted that sense of like extremely creepy small town claustrophobia because I find that interesting as a concept.
Yeah, and it just really comes across. So what about the year that you said? So it's set in about, oh, and I did want to remark too, what's so interesting is that she comes back to her house as like this kind of time capsule. And that's just so rare that we get to, I mean, I think she's been gone about 7 years or 8 years or so. How many of us have to come back and really face our whole childhood where everything has stayed, even the cereal bowl that she had that morning when she left the house is still there. So she really does have to confront it almost like this perfectly preserved time capsule. Was that important to you that she had to confront it in that way, that everything was still the way she had left it?
Yeah, I wanted it to feel like she was walking into a tomb.
Yeah.
And so that is something that's the vibe I wanted to have, of it being like a tomb, or walking into, an Egyptian pyramid, and those stories of them like opening the door to the pyramid for the first time, and like the old air from 2000 years ago hitting their face. I wanted to have that same feeling, because in her mind, she has built up this mythology about her family. And I wanted that sense of everything to be just museum-like and preserved and quiet, but moldy and deeply creepy and cobwebbed.
Yeah, and it definitely, so what about setting it in the late 1990s? I assume some of it was because the limited technology, but I mean, but I just think you capture, I mean, it's a Gen Xer's kind of dream, because you get Designing Women is on, and the Avon bubble bath, the My Little Ponies, and the puffy paint. There's just all these details that just resonate so true for that time period. But why was that, the late 90s, important to you?
So part of it was technology was a big part of it. I didn't want cell phones to be in regular use, because I didn't want, for two reasons. One is that I didn't want her to be able to solve her problems that easily by just looking something up on the internet. But also I wanted that sense of isolation and loneliness to be really profound in a way that I think is easier to illustrate when every time she got bored or lonely, she couldn't pick up her phone and like doom scroll Instagram. I think that people are as lonely now as they've ever been. You can be as lonely in 2022 as you were in 1997, but I think it looks very different. And so for her, she's living in a city, an unnamed city that looks a lot like Boston, Massachusetts. She tells her friends there that she's just going to go west. She doesn't have a phone. She takes off, and nobody really knows where she's gone. She might be in Nevada or Colorado or have gone to Mississippi, and people are surprised to hear that she has just stopped in her hometown and not moved on. And so I wanted that feeling of people really being unaware of what she is, where she is, and what she's doing, because also what she's doing is absolutely crazy, and anybody who cared about her would try to convince her not to do it.
And along those lines of the time period, I think the book pays such honor to those who were dying of AIDS around that time and really weren't mourned properly. Like, as you say in the book, or maybe in an interview I read, that it was more political, like, oh, the child that got it, that wasn't a gay person or a drug user or something. So was
Right.
that an intention of yours to kind of to get a little bit more justice to those deaths? Or
So I knew one of the because of one of the plot points of the book, there are a lot of gay men in the book. And I knew already that it was going to be set in the 1990s. So there was no way of avoiding AIDS being important to the book. So I went to Ryan Donovan, who is a professor at Duke, is a friend who teaches theater, but he taught a course that included a piece about theater and AIDS. And so I went to him and said, I'm writing this book. I can remember what I can remember about that time. Like, I remember those People magazine articles, and I remember, and the band played on. But I was too young. I'm younger than the people in the book. Della's 24. I think I would have been a young high school student, or middle range high school student at the time. And so I have still like a sort of child's view of what was going on, not a sophisticated view. And I asked Ryan to send me recommendations for things that I could read to understand what the context was, but also understand what the point of view would have been like from a gay man, and not just my understanding as a straight female child. And so he sent me all of these course materials that were amazing to read, and really, I hope, give the book a sense of reality. But also I have quite a few friends who are gay men, and I spoke with one of them who is in his 60s and lives in San Francisco, has lived in San Francisco for a long time, and lots of our mutual friends have HIV or AIDS, and so it was possible to talk to them about the experience of their personal experiences living during that time and what it was like. So that, if there's a sense of anger, that probably comes from me. I think it's, accurate resentment of how people were treated and looked at, and in many cases abandoned by their families, and also a sense of real, outsiderdom in that case as well.
yeah, you just really do. I think it's just so important the way you handle that, and you don't shy away from it. So I know we only have a few minutes left of our segment here, but I want to ask you a few more writer type questions. So so you have two young kids, really young kids, under the age of 3, I think. How do you manage your writing time with young children? I'm sure that's something that everybody wants to know, because I could never get anything done when my kids were young.
So I am currently in an accountability spreadsheet with 2 other writers. And if they were hearing me answer this, they would laugh, because my accountability spreadsheet every day is hope to write a single word, do not write a single word, tired. Lately it's not been going well because nobody is sleeping through the night because the children are sick. In general, I would say I've had to be more efficient in using time and more organized about using time than I was before I had children. But because of that, I think I make much better use of time. And so for this book, I just decided I was going to write 3 days a week. I had a spreadsheet where I tracked all the words that I wrote. And that made it easy to feel positive about progress, even when progress was very little. I remember there was one day that I was in the British Library, it was right before the pandemic, and the E broke off my keyboard. but I had paid for a babysitter for my baby so that I could write. And so I just thought, I'm not leaving this library until I write, because this day has cost me 80 pounds or whatever. And so I wrote as much as I could write without the letter E, because I couldn't use it. And as much as I could write ended up being like a paragraph and a half or something, but I was so satisfied. And I think that is something that was different before. I spent a lot of time feeling bad about my writing and feeling like it didn't accomplish much. And what has changed about having children is that I really felt grateful to have time writing, and writing time felt very energizing in a way that it didn't before. I felt very grateful to have it, and I felt grateful to accomplish anything. So even if I had a day when I wrote 80 words, I didn't care if there were 80 great words. I was just happy that I wrote them. Whereas before I would have, beaten myself up for not writing 1,800 words a day or something.
It does make you realize too how much more there is to the writing process than sitting down and writing. That there's stuff like even just unloading the dishwasher is sometimes you're thinking of something and sometimes something comes to you, and that's part of it too. And when you can't always be at the keyboard, I think you're more cognizant of that. So just generally, what do you hope readers get out of this story? What is if you could kind of hold their head and make them feel what you want them to, what is your hope for that?
I mean, I hope my hope is that some people find it funny, because I found it funny. I found it funny to write. I think it's a dark humor, but I think that there are bits in the book that, even though it's we've talked about like AIDS and homophobia and like family breakdowns and like various crises, but I think that there are moments of real humor and resilience about the book. So that's what I hope people take from it.
And I think there's so many moments where Adele is just holding these mirrors in front of people and making them kind of face their demons, like with Greg or Jean, and she really is kind of good at that. And I think they are grateful in some way for it. And my very last question before RJ Julia takes over is, which Golden Girl are you?
I am definitely Dorothy, who wishes that she were one of the others. Some days I would like to be a Sophia. Some days I would like to be a Rose. I can never fool myself into thinking that I'm a Blanche, because I'm in no way a Blanche, but I am 100% a Dorothy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Which Golden Girl are you? No, I'm flipping it. Which Golden Girl are you, Ethan Joella?
I think I'm a wannabe Dorothy, but I don't think I can. To explain to the audience,
100% Rose. The fact that you don't even know that you're a Rose is what makes you such a Rose. It's a joke.
It's all. Colleen and I have bonded over because you post a lot of Golden Girl. Well, your screen name is your handle is a former Mrs. Stanley's Bornak, and I told her that I indoctrinated my girls at a young age with Golden Girls, and it's our proud shared thing. Well, thanks for thinking I'm a Rose.
100% a Rose. A joke to think that you're not a Rose, like clearly, obviously.
All right, so it is time for our Q&A portion of the event. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will get those answered. So our first question is also part comment. I'm so impressed you wrote this book on your maternity leave. Did you have a longer leave because you were in the UK, or are you just incredible?
I'm not incredible. So in the UK, you can take up to 12 months of leave, and up to 9 months are paid. How much you get paid depends on your job and where you work. So it could be very little, but you do get paid for 9 months. But you can take 12 months of leave. So I took 12 months of leave, and it took me about 6 months to write the book. So I am not incredible. I had time that is not available in any other job that I've had in the United States.
I mean, they did write you can be both, and I think you certainly are
both. Whoever, bless whatever person thought that was possible, but no, I had adequate resources.
Our next question: what surprised you most in writing the book?
I'm surprised that it was a pretty quick experience, I guess. I really wrote the book in 6 months. Gave it to an agent, got an agent, gave it to an editor, the edits that I got, my editor was very good. And my edits were extremely helpful, but I would say pretty light editing. I didn't feel like there were massive changes to the book. So I'm surprised that the book that you read here is probably 90% first draft.
Wow.
Which is very different. When I was writing short stories as part of an MFA program, I really wrestled with every story, and I would just spend years and years and years and years, like really more than 5 years on a single story and never really finish it. But this, I just finished and I thought, okay, that's the book. And if I sell it, that's fine. If I don't sell it, that's fine. I'll move on. I'll do something else. But I'm just not going to spend years editing this because I don't have that time. Yeah, so I'm surprised by that.
All right. So kind of a similar question did any scenes surprise you as you wrote them? More specifically, did any characters take over and take you in an unexpected writing?
Ooh, it's hard to, spoiler alerts, I'm trying to figure out how to tell you something. So there are some unexpected house guests that happen in the book, later in the book, and I was not expecting that to happen. That was not on my one-page overview of what would happen in the book. And so that was a surprise, and ended up being, there are several funny scenes to write because of interactions between these specific people who otherwise didn't really interact in the book.
Very interesting. All right. Did you practice dismantling anything in your home to get the details right?
No, because I'm lazy.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Does writing energize or exhaust you? And that can be for both of you guys.
I'm going to turn that to Ethan first so that I can drink a lovely bit of medicine.
I should have turned my camera off. No, it energizes me. I probably feel about writing how most people feel about exercising for the day, that I feel like I've accomplished something. Getting myself there to do it is just takes forever. I circle the airport forever, but once I've done it, I'm really happy I did.
So for me, energized because I don't have that much writing time. It's usually 3 days a week that I have an office. I don't have an office in my house. So I leave the house 3 days a week and go to an office for a few hours. And that feels like good mental space time to have. And so when I'm there, I feel very, lucky to be there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see what else we have. Do you think someone could be a writer if they don't feel emotion strongly?
Wow, what an interesting question. Yes, I think they can be. Ethan, what do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I agree. I think if they're observation, I think it's about observation, and I think I guess the emotions can come with that. I think so. I think we all look at things differently. I don't think every writer is the same kind of takes the same approach.
Okay. Now that you've written your first novel, are you eager to write another?
I am writing another. I will say I am writing another. Whether my level of eagerness depends on the day and how I feel and how much sleep I have gotten, but I am writing another.
Okay. Let's see what else we have. I love that you wrote at one point without the letter E. Do you feel like that experience changed the style or the tone of writing itself and or your relationship to the book? I'm always interested. Useful.
Sorry, what was that? Did I miss the end of the?
Oh, did you not hear the question?
I didn't hear the end of the question. So
oh, sorry. It's just I'm always interested in how limitations might be useful.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, it certainly changed those 2 paragraphs that were in the book. I would say that there were lots of limitations actually in that I was writing the book not only with a newborn, but also in the pandemic when it was illegal to leave your house in London for you could only leave for specific purposes, certain times of day. So I would write the book when my husband could look after the baby. and the baby was napping, and I could try to get 2 to 3 hours at a time writing. And I think that those limitations, like limitations of time and having to have like really a consolidated and efficient way of working, that made for a pretty intense writing process, which actually I think suited this particular book really well, because the book itself is about like an intense and crazy project. I think writing with a newborn during the pandemic is an intense and crazy project that I probably wouldn't recommend to anybody else, although I'm glad that I did it. Yes, that's my answer.
Okay. Is there anyone or anything specifically that has helped you become a better writer? And that can be for both of you.
Then you start.
I think, well, I mean, I did an MFA just about 20 years ago. So, I mean, I think it was useful to a certain extent, but what really, I think, helped my writing was joining our local writers guild. They were like, I think they were more of maybe my, and I hate to use the word middle-aged MFA, but I think they were my MFA later on. And I think you just have to find those right people that encourage you to be better and will tell you about, oh, you have to read this book, or what are you working on lately? I think just having that kind of positivity and encouragement in your life is really important. And that was really valuable for me.
And for me, I had lots of great English teachers, I would say, growing up, and people who really pushed me and recommended that I read particular books. I was talking about this at a podcast interview earlier this week. It was saying how just at a certain point in high school, I had read the books that were on the curriculum and was saying something to an English teacher, and she ended up giving me like a printout of the AP reading list. And I think I was a freshman or a sophomore, and so I wasn't taking the AP courses yet. But she gave me this list, and I just went through, taped it to my bedroom wall, and I went through and read all of the books. And there were so many books there that were so different than what we were reading that I found them really inspirational. We just read a lot of things that I remember are like the boarding school, like 1950s boarding school novels. Like, what's the one about the man who falls off the tree? Do you know what I'm talking about, Ethan?
A separate piece.
A separate piece. Separate piece, yeah. It felt like there was a lot of a separate piece type books, but in this list, Toni Morrison was on the list, and that was the first time I had read her work, and it was just so extraordinary. I remember that really shifting my ideas about what was possible in fiction.
Okay, let's see. Do you read your book reviews? And if so, how do you deal with good or bad ones?
I don't, but I will turn it to Ethan because I know that he does. And so I'm curious.
This is another writer that asked that, I bet. Because the good ones are amazing and they make you feel special and terrific and they're worth it. And the bad ones are demoralizing. And if you can figure out how to kind of get one without the other. Some people have a trusted person that will look at those for you, but I'm just like the kid playing with matches. I have to go to Goodreads every so often and look, and then you feel, but you shouldn't. I strongly caution against it, but I think it is good to know how it's being received, but I don't think it's good when you see 1.5 stars or 1.75. It's petty and nasty, and but I don't know. It's not. I don't know. Elizabeth Strout, I think, said it's not your book anymore. Once you publish it, it's everybody else's, and I think you just have to give into that.
All right. Do you base your characters off people you know when writing?
I don't, though I base them off the looks of people, but not their characters.
And Ethan, what about you?
Oh, that's I just don't want to step on Colleen's toes at all. No, I don't usually have people I know in my writing, but the same thing. Sometimes a look of somebody, but sometimes it's something that happened to them in their past. Like my brother has said to me, "Oh, your character did the shoplifting thing," and I thought, "Oh yeah, that's right. I did take that from you." So sometimes events from their past, but not. Because I think you do have a lot of family members that'll say, "Oh, I'm going to find myself in your book," and that's me. And that hasn't happened with me. I can think of characters that just come out of nowhere.
All right. And our final question, it's our favorite one here at RJ Julia. What are you both reading right now?
Ethan, start with you.
I am reading Ocean State by Stuart Onan, is his new one. I love his books. I loved Last Night at the Lobster, and this is it's really good. And I'm also reading, I can't think of the title though, but it's Hannah Halperin's. She's in our debut group, and I'm loving the book. I'm 100 pages into it. I'm really loving it.
Is that the one about domestic abuse?
It's one about addiction, falling in love with somebody with an addiction. I can't think of the title though. I have the bound copy somewhere upstairs. But I wish I could think of it, but it's really good. I think it's going to be published in 2023.
Okay. I just picked up a copy of Chantal Johnson's book, which is called Post-Traumatic. I recently read Whimsy by Shannon McLeod. I have my eye on lots of books that I am excited about. The Shore by Katie Runde, Not Safe for Work by Isabel Kaplan, Work Wife by Allison Hart. I just read, finally got my copy of Dava Shastri's Last Day, which was exactly what I wanted. I really love, as a person who has a Instagram handle that is about the Golden Girls, I really like celebrities and messy families in Hollywood. And this is just the perfect book for people who like those things too.
I second The Shore too by Katie Runde. It's really good.
Katie Runde, man. Katie Runde.
All right. Well, I want to thank both Colleen and Ethan so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you guys being here. As always, don't forget to purchase a copy of Housebreaking. We do have links in the chat, so you can purchase them there. You can also come visit us in store. So make sure you purchase your copy. And we also have links to A Little Hope, that as well, in your chat box or again in store. Thank you again to Colleen and Ethan, and I hope you all have a great rest of your night.
Going to sleep now.
Thanks so much. Yeah, good. Night, night.